All right, let's talk about Coca-Cola. You see it everywhere, right? It's this global symbol of happiness, of people coming together. But what if I told you the real story, the one behind those perfect ads, is a complete mess, a wild ride of accidents and sheer luck? Just to get your head around how massive this company is, check out this number, 2.2 billion. That's how many drinks Coca-Cola serves every single day. Think about that for a second. That's like a third of the entire planet having one of their drinks daily. It's a scale that's just staggering. So how did they get there? You'd think it was some genius master plan, right? Well, that's the crazy part. What if this entire empire, this symbol of perfection, was actually built on a foundation of accidents, total blunders, and one giant secret? That's the story we're digging into. So where does a story like this even begin? Well, it's not in some shiny corporate boardroom. Nope, it's way, way stranger than that. We're going back to the very beginning, to a backyard, with a man desperately trying to cure himself. See, the story of Coke starts with a morphine addiction. This guy, John Pemberton, he was a Civil War vet. He got wounded and, like a lot of soldiers back then, got hooked on morphine for the pain. He wasn't trying to create the world's favorite drink. He was in his backyard with a kettle, frantically mixing stuff together to create a so-called patent medicine, a painkiller, to kick his own addiction. And you have to understand what patent medicine meant back then. His first creation was a brain tonic. And yeah, it had coconut, coca leaf extract, and, get this, about 9 milligrams of cocaine in every glass. And the wildest part? That was totally normal for the time. Cocaine was just another ingredient like sugar. They put it in everything, promising it would cure headaches, and even, believe it or not, the very opioid addiction Pemberton was suffering from. So here's the first huge accidental pivot. Pemberton's French wine Coca was, well, a wine. It was alcoholic. But literally right after he perfected it, what happens? Atlanta passes prohibition laws. His brand new invention is now illegal. You'd think that's game over, right? A total disaster. But no, that single setback forced him to scramble. He had to replace the wine with something else, so he used sugary syrup. And just like that, completely by accident, the non-alcoholic Coca-Cola was born. But here's the tragic part. Pemberton had no clue what he was sitting on. In its first year, Coke was a total flop. I mean, it sold maybe 9 drinks a day. He was sick, he was broke, still fighting his addiction, and so he started selling off the rights to what would become a multi-billion-dollar empire for peanuts. All told, he made a maximum of $2,300. He died completely bankrupt. Okay, so that's chapter 1. Now the formula is out of Pemberton's hands and it lands with this guy, a marketing genius named Asa Candler. He's the one who really built the empire. But even he was about to make a mistake, a huge one, that would ironically make the company even bigger. Candler was a totally different beast. He wasn't an inventor. He was a marketing warlord. He basically invented the idea of a modern brand with this 3-pronged attack. First, the free sample revolution. He gave away coupons for millions of free Cokes. Then, the psychology of ubiquity. He slapped the logo on everything. Clocks, calendars, trays. You literally couldn't escape it. And finally, he created brand evangelists, making sure the product was perfect wherever you bought it. And did it work? Oh yeah. The growth was just explosive. Remember those 9 drinks a day in Atlanta? Under Candler, syrup sales grew 10-fold. Within just a few years, it went from an Atlanta secret to being sold in every single state in the US. Just unbelievable. But here's where the story takes another weird turn. Candler was a genius, but he was also stubborn. 2 lawyers show up at his office with this idea. Hey, let's put Coca-Cola in bottles. And Candler thought it was the dumbest thing he'd ever heard. He was horrified. He saw Coke as a premium soda fountain drink. To him, bottling was this cheap fad that would destroy the brand's image. He just wanted them out of his office. So just to get rid of these guys, he makes a deal he would later call his biggest mistake ever. He sold them the exclusive and perpetual rights to bottle Coca-Cola across the entire country. For how much, you ask? $1. Just a single dollar. And the story goes he never even bothered to cash the check. And this is the billion-dollar blunder that turned into their greatest asset. It's a total paradox. See, that terrible contract locked the price of syrup forever. He couldn't raise it. But, and this is the key, that mistake accidentally created the franchise bottling system. It built a massive nationwide distribution network for free. And since they couldn't make more money by raising the syrup price, they had to sell more Coke. So they marketed the iconic 5-cent nickel Coke for nearly 70 years. His worst deal, the one he regretted most, is what made Coke the most dominant product in America. Okay, so the company is a national powerhouse. But how did it go global? Well, that takes us to our next chapter, and our next leader, Robert Woodruff. And his big growth hack? A world war. When World War II kicked off, Woodruff made this incredible declaration. He said every man in uniform gets a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents, no matter where he is or what it costs the company. Now, that sounds patriotic, and it was, but it was also an absolute strategic masterstroke. Because of that, the U.S. government literally declared Coke an essential good for troop morale. You know what that meant? They were exempt from sugar rationing, the very thing that was crippling all of their competitors back home. So the war basically became Coke's engine for global expansion. They sent their own people, these Coca-Cola colonels, right to the front lines, not to fight, but to build bottling plants. And here's the brilliant part. After the war ended, those plants stayed. They never left. Look at these numbers. They went from just 5 overseas plants before the war to 64 after. The war gave them a permanent global footprint on the government's dime. And this is the point where Coke becomes something more than a soda. Under Woodruff, they basically invented the modern image of Santa Claus. That big, jolly guy in the red suit, that was Coke's advertising. And then you have that famous Hilltop ad, teaching the world to sing. They weren't just selling a fizzy brown drink anymore. They were selling an idea. They were selling American culture in a bottle. So for decades, they were completely untouchable. King of the hill. And that kind of success, well, it can lead to arrogance. And that arrogance led directly to the single greatest blunder in the history of marketing, a totally self-inflicted wound. Okay, fast forward to the 1980s. Pepsi is gaining ground with their Pepsi Challenge. You've seen it, right? The blind taste test. And it was working. People were picking the sweeter taste of Pepsi. So Coke decides to fight back with data. They do this massive project, 200,000 of their own blind taste tests. And the data was crystal clear. A new, sweeter formula for Coke won. 55 to 45. On paper, it was a total sure thing. But they made one fatal mistake. They asked the wrong question. They asked, what do you like the taste of? But they never asked, how would you feel if we took your Coke away? They measured the rational, the taste. But they completely, totally ignored the emotional, the deep, nostalgic, irrational connection people had to the brand. They forgot they weren't just changing a formula. They were messing with a piece of culture. And the backlash was a volcanic eruption. It was pure rage. People felt betrayed. I'm talking over 40,000 letters of complaint. They were getting up to 8,000 angry phone calls a day. There were grassroots protests. People were hoarding cases of the old stuff. It was chaos. And Coca-Cola learned a very hard, very public lesson. They didn't own their brand anymore. The people did. So after just 79 days, in a pretty humiliating reversal, they surrendered. They brought back the original formula as Coca-Cola Classic, and it was met with this massive celebration. But that brings us to today. The company survived that blunder, but now it faces a completely different and maybe even tougher identity crisis. Because here's the modern paradox of Coca-Cola. The promise, the marketing, it's all about happiness, unity, bringing people together. But the price of that promise, of being everywhere, is a very real connection to the global public health crisis around sugar and the fact that for 6 years running, they've been named the #1 corporate plastic polluter on the planet. So you see, the big secret to Coca-Cola was never really the formula locked away in that vault in Atlanta. The real secret was the story. A crazy, chaotic story of addiction, accidents, world wars, and pure marketing genius that somehow took a simple sugar water and wove it into the very fabric of our culture. It's a true paradox in a bottle, which really leaves just one question. What does this brand actually mean to you?